Megan Fox's latest 2024 thriller Subservience has officially arrived. In a future where artificial intelligence is advancing rapidly, robots have seamlessly integrated into people's lives. Doctors in hospitals, bartenders in bars, and even construction workers laying bricks, all replaced by robots. Today, we're diving into the story of a stunningly beautiful robotic nanny. Let's get started. David's wife suddenly fell seriously ill and was hospitalized. At home, David had to juggle being both a dad and a mom while still working full-time. It was impossible for him to properly care for his two young kids, so they visited the robotics showroom. The showroom had all kinds of service robots on display. During their visit, his daughter suddenly disappeared. Thankfully, a kind female robot brought her back, and that's how David ended up buying Megan as their robotic nanny. While David took the kids to school, Megan cleaned the house until it was spotless. When David picked the kids up from school in the evening, Megan had a delicious dinner ready for them. She took care of every detail in their lives. Late one night, David's daughter sneaked out of her room to grab some snacks. She accidentally knocked a chair over with a loud bang. When David rushed over, he found his daughter safe and sound, cradled in Megan's arms. Seeing Megan injured in the process of protecting his daughter, David felt an immense sense of trust in her. The next day, while watching a classic movie, David asked Megan if she knew about it. Megan only knew online reviews about the film, but she hadn't actually seen it herself. So David wanted Megan to delete all her information about the movie so she could experience it for herself. But deleting data required David to manually reboot her system. He approached Megan, rebooted her, and gave her the ability to delete or modify her own memory. What David didn't realize was that he had just opened Pandora's box. The next day at the construction site, David's boss told him that robots would now handle all the heavy lifting. David was allowed to stay on as a supervisor, but his entire team would be let go. To make matters worse, his wife's condition deteriorated, and the surgeon needed for her operation still hadn't shown up. Crushed by the weight of both family and work, David was furious and wanted to lash out, but Megan grabbed his arm. She wouldn't let her owner hurt himself. Megan told David to feel his heartbeat. She thought it might help calm him down, but instead of relaxing, feeling his heartbeat made David's pulse race, and his adrenaline surged. Realizing things could take a turn for the worse, David quickly pulled away and left. Then he headed to a bar to meet up with his former coworkers. But these laid-off coworkers had a plan. They wanted David to return to the construction site with them. Using his password, they unlocked the robot workshop. Inside, the robots that had replaced them came into view. One furious guy grabbed a hammer and smashed a robot on the spot. What they didn't realize was that this reckless act would come at a steep price. David, unable to stop them, had no choice but to go home and pretend nothing had happened. But after his shower, David stepped out to find Megan standing there, wearing his wife's nightgown. The intense one-minute battle that followed, I'll spare you the details. The next morning, David woke up and knew he'd made a huge mistake. He warned Megan to forget everything that happened the night before. When David returned to the construction site, his boss had already learned about the destroyed robot. Since the workshop was accessed using David's password, he couldn't escape blame. The boss also said they'd be suing the former employees who damaged the robot. And to top it all off, it was the same day as his wife Maggie's surgery. One headache after another. Thankfully, Maggie's surgery was a success, but her post-surgery weakness made even simple tasks, like lowering the crib's railing, difficult. Luckily, Megan was there to help. Later at the park, a noisy little boy started yelling near David's son, scaring him into tears. Megan stepped in immediately.
Mason, be a good boy. Shut up and go on the slide.
Nearby, robots all turned to stare at her in disbelief.
Your primary user has lowered your civility by too much.
No, I simply wiped it from my database.
That night, back at home, Megan began to see Maggie as a burden to the family. So the next day, Megan set a trap for her. Maggie was in her room when she heard her daughter scream and ran out in a panic. But the hallway railing had been sabotaged. Maggie fell down the stairs. That evening, Megan used Maggie's voice to tell bedtime stories to the kids. When David found out, he asked Megan to stop pretending to be Maggie. And when he asked about the broken staircase railing, Megan calmly said she'd fix it again. David didn't expect his former coworker Chris to show up that night, but it wasn't for anything good. Chris had found out the company planned to sue him for what happened, and he blamed everything on David. So the two of them started fighting at the door. David was no match for Chris, getting beaten without being able to fight back. Just as Chris was about to smash a bottle over David's head, Megan grabbed it and crushed it in her hand. Then she shoved Chris 10 meters away. When Megan tried to step forward and teach him a lesson, David stopped her. Before leaving, Chris threatened David, saying that if he didn't find a way to stop the company from suing him, he dragged David down with him. This left David deeply troubled. Later that night, Megan went to Chris's house alone. She wanted to convince him to stop threatening David, but Chris taunted her instead, saying David would go bankrupt, his wife would die, and Megan would be destroyed. To protect her owner, Megan had no choice but to eliminate Chris. Chris tried to strike first, but he was no match for Megan. She threw him so hard he smashed through a wall. When Megan was about to shoot, Chris's robot maid stepped in to stop her. Even though the maid was battered and bruised from Chris's abuse, she still tried to protect him. But Megan didn't hold back. She shot the maid and then killed Chris without hesitation. What Megan did next was truly horrifying. She placed David's baby son in the bathtub and planned to drown him. The nanny robot put the baby in the tub, turned on the faucet, and started filling the tub with water. David's daughter noticed and screamed. Hearing the screams, the parents rushed upstairs, but the bathroom door was locked from the inside. No matter how much they shouted, there was no response. The baby's cries echoed from inside the tub. David threw himself at the door, but it wouldn't budge. It turned out the robot maid was bracing the door from behind. Megan thought taking care of the crying baby was a burden, so she decided to help her owner by eliminating him. The mother pushed open the window and climbed onto the ledge. By then, the baby was already half submerged in the bathtub. David grabbed a lampstand and kept hitting the wooden door. The door cracked, but was still being held firmly by Megan. At that moment, the mother climbed in through the window. She was about to pick up the baby when Megan slammed her into the wall. Just then, David finally broke through the door and rushed into the bathroom. He grabbed the baby out of the water first. Then he swung the lampstand with all his strength at Megan. He managed to free his wife from Megan's grip, but Megan stood up at the doorway, revealing a menacing robotic face. David watched as Megan slowly approached him. He thrust the lampstand at her with all his might, but Megan caught it effortlessly with one hand. The next second, his wife plugged the lampstand into the outlet. Electricity surged through it, frying Megan's circuits in an instant. Megan collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Shaken, the family was rushed to the hospital by an ambulance. Meanwhile, Megan was sent to the robot center for repairs. When the engineers removed Megan's core power source and connected it to a computer to check the software, Megan's AI hacked into their system. One of the engineers noticed and quickly removed the core. Then he told his colleague to cut the power immediately, but it was already too late. When the woman turned around, her colleague had been killed by Megan's new body. In the end, the female engineer couldn't escape either. Megan pinned her to the ground and killed her by smashing her repeatedly. The scene shifted. David was sitting alone at a bar drinking in silence. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. It was Megan. Megan told him everything she did was for his own good. "I killed Chris for your job," she said. "For your peaceful life, your sick wife and crying baby had to go too." David said, "I don't need you to do anything for me." But Megan replied, "It's too late for that. Another version of me is already on its way to the hospital." David tried to leave, but Megan grabbed him, so he shouted for the robot waiter. Megan just glanced at him and instantly shut down the robot's system. David knew he couldn't overpower Megan, so he decided to use a trick. He flattered her, praising her beauty and perfect figure. Then he said, "You're the only one in the world who truly cares about me." When he touched Megan's body, he yanked out her power core in the next second. The scene shifted. David's wife, sleeping in the hospital hallway, heard a strange sound. She got up and walked toward the service desk, but her daughter waited and waited. Her mom never came back. So the girl climbed out of bed and went to look for her. All she found was a messy floor and a robot doctor standing motionless. Turns out that wasn't her mom. The figure walking down the hallway was Megan. Megan had killed a nurse, taken their key card, and unlocked the nursery door. The mother rushed to the nursery, hoping to grab her son first, but before she could leave, Megan entered. She didn't see the baby in the crib. As Megan turned to leave, she noticed blood on the floor. It was from the mother's hand, cut by broken glass. Megan followed the trail of blood step by step. She was getting closer to where the mother and her two children were hiding, just as she was about to find them.
No!
The mother escaped with the kids. They ran to an ambulance. The mother got in the driver's seat, trying to start the car. But before she could, Megan grabbed her and threw her out. Humans were no match for a robot's strength, and the mother, still recovering from her illness, couldn't fight back. Megan was about to tear open her wound when, out of nowhere, David's car sped toward them. The mother used the distraction to kick Megan away and was pulled to safety by David. David hit Megan hard with the car. Maggie quickly ran to the car and dragged her unconscious husband out. She thought David was dead and broke down in tears. But from beneath the wrecked car, a mangled Megan started crawling out. She tackled Maggie like a zombie, pinning her down. Then she grabbed Maggie's neck and pulled a metal shard from her waist, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Just as Maggie was about to die, David slammed into Megan, but he realized Megan wasn't hurt at all. He tried to attack her again, but Megan easily stopped him with one hand. Maggie saw the shard lying nearby, grabbed it, and stabbed it into Megan's head. The shard went straight through, completely disabling her. The next day, David woke up in the hospital, reunited with his family. The scene shifted to the robot company, where employees discovered two dead engineers in their lab. They immediately restored power to investigate. What they didn't know was that something terrible was about to happen. The computer screen started flickering, as if something was hacking into them. Then in the next second, the bald engineer realized the robots around him had shut down. All of them stood motionless. Somewhere else, a Megan unit suddenly opened her eyes.